After moving in together, my husband's parents demanded a spare key, saying, "I need to check in whenever I want." My husband handed it over without hesitation. I simply smiled and waited. A week later, they let themselves in only to find themselves locked inside with someone they never expected. When my husband Adam and I moved into our new home in Austin, Texas, I thought it was the start of something great. We had been married for just under a year, and this house was supposed to be our fresh start, a cozy 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, enough space to settle in, maybe even start a family someday. But then his parents happened. Adam's parents, George and Marcia, had always been a lot, overbearing, controlling, and completely incapable of understanding the concept of boundaries. While we were dating, I had seen glimpses of it, his mom calling him 5 times a day to remind him about vitamins, his dad insisting on checking in whenever we had a date night. Annoying? Yes, but I figured once we were married and had our own place, they would naturally back off. I was so wrong. We had barely been in the house for a day when George and Marcia showed up unannounced, no warning, no invitation, just their car pulling up in the driveway like they had the right to be there. I answered the door, and before I could even say hello, Marcia walked in, looking around like she was inspecting a hotel room she wasn't quite satisfied with. "We brought you a little housewarming gift," she said, shoving a bottle of cheap wine into my hands. George followed behind her, holding a printed-out list of home maintenance tips, as if we were incompetent children who couldn't figure out how to change an air filter. I was already annoyed, but then Marcia sat herself down on our couch, crossed her legs, and said, "So when do we get our spare key?" I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" George chuckled like I was being ridiculous. "Oh, sweetheart, come on, of course we need a key. Just in case." "In case of what?" I asked. "You know," Marcia chimed in, "if there's an emergency or if we need to check in on things, water the plants, make sure you're keeping up with the cleaning." My brain stopped processing after that last part. I turned to Adam, waiting for him to shut this nonsense down. Instead, he nodded. "Yeah, that makes sense." And then he handed them a copy of our house key. I could feel every single ounce of rage in my body trying to burst out of me at once. I forced myself to smile too sweetly. "Oh, of course," I said. "You are absolutely right." That's when I started planning. I played the long game. For a week, I acted so agreeable that even Marcia stopped raising an eyebrow at me. I thanked them for looking out for us, made jokes about how helpful it would be, even suggested they stop by whenever they wanted. What they didn't know was that I had spent every free moment setting a trap. Step 1, I installed a second lock on the inside of the front door, one of those heavy-duty, hotel-style locks that can only be opened from inside. Step 2, I set up a motion-activated camera in the living room, which sent real-time alerts to my phone. Step 3, I made a very important phone call to my Uncle Mike. I didn't have to wait long. Exactly 1 week later, my phone buzzed at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, an alert from the security camera, motion detected, living room. I opened the app, and there they were, George and Marcia, inside my house. They weren't just inside, they were snooping. I watched as George walked through the kitchen, opening cabinets and drawers like he was looking for something. Marcia wandered into the living room, smoothing out the throw blanket on the couch before making her way toward the bedroom. Then she did something that made my blood boil, she started folding my laundry. I stared at the screen, half in shock, half in rage. These people really thought they had the right to walk in whenever they wanted, go through my things, clean my house like I was some irresponsible child. Then, right on cue, they tried to leave, and that's when they realized they were locked inside. I saw it happen in real time. George went to open the front door, turned the knob, and nothing. He tried again, pulling harder this time. Still nothing. Marcia came over, confused. George rattled the knob again, then looked up and finally noticed the extra lock at the top of the door. He turned back toward Marcia, his face slowly turning red. "What the hell is this?" Then, before they could even process what was happening, the door to the basement opened, and Uncle Mike walked in. Uncle Mike is not someone you want to be alone in a house with if you don't know him. He's 6 feet 3 inches, shaved head, full beard, and covered in tattoos, most of which he designed himself. He used to run with a biker gang back in the day, and even though he settled down and owns a tattoo shop now, he still looks like someone you don't want to piss off. He stepped into the living room, cracking his knuckles. "Well, well, well," he said, his voice gravelly. "What do we have here?" George froze. Marcia let out a small scream and grabbed onto his arm. "What the hell are you doing in our house?" George demanded. Mike raised an eyebrow. "Your house?" Marcia pointed at him, shaking. "You were trespassing." Mike laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, that's funny," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out his own set of keys. "Because I live here." That's right, I had sublet the house to Uncle Mike for a week, legally, with paperwork filed with the landlord. My in-laws had just broken into a legally occupied residence. George's face turned an alarming shade of red. Marcia, still clutching his arm, looked like she might pass out. Mike leaned against the wall, arms crossed, calm as ever. "You are lying," George snapped, pointing at him like an angry school principal. "You do not live here." Mike pulled a folded-up piece of paper from his pocket and unfolded it slowly, too slowly, like he was enjoying the moment. "Signed lease agreement," he said. "Dated, notarized." I had made sure it was airtight. George snatched the paper out of his hands, scanning the document like he could somehow will it to be fake. Marcia peered over his shoulder, lips trembling. "This is ridiculous," she whispered. Mike smirked. "You know what's ridiculous? Walking into someone else's house uninvited." George ignored him and turned to Marcia.